Hello, bakers. Happy Thursday, and welcome to today's Thought Leadership Thursday with Goodway Technologies on combustible dust in bakeries. My name is Mark Flurka, and I'm your host today. With over 55 years of providing innovative maintenance and sanitation solutions, Goodway Technologies has the industry's most reliable surface and conveyor belt sanitizing equipment for robust hygiene and food production plants. Commercial bakeries, snack producers, produce processing facilities, and breweries are just a few places where sanitation professionals can find their high-quality machines. Today, we are joined by Eric Potorsky, Industrial Vacuum Specialist at Goodway Technologies. Welcome, Eric.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate you doing this.
Excellent. No, we're glad to have you here. Eric, first of all, to start off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role at Goodway?
Sure. Well, myself, my name is Eric Kotorski. I've been in the industrial vacuum business for quite a long time, nearing 30 years now, where really the specialty is just all things vacuum and how to apply it to different industries for different applications. Combustible dust
So,
has been a big
so
part of that.
sorry to interrupt, but I'm sure you get teased about this all the time. So 30 years, I guess it doesn't suck, right?
It doesn't, I guess it doesn't. And it's true, right?
But when we think of Goodway, what would you say describes succinctly what the company provides?
We're sanitation experts and maintenance experts. So we have several key aspects of what we provide. But when it comes to sanitation, cleanliness, that's really where we focus.
Cool, cool. Now, when talking of combustibles, now obviously you offer a wet and dry process.
Sure.
And so tell us about the benefits of this to product shelf life and downtime, and then we're gonna kind of get into more of the combustible stuff.
Sure. I mean, when it comes to dust safety and hygiene, wet processes could be your final cleanup, but you have dry materials in bakeries that you have to collect dry. So there's a hazard associated with that. So we do both because we have to collect it safely and then be able to sanitize it properly as well.
Yeah, yeah. And as we all know, if we try to hose down flour dust, I mean, all it does is make us a
Yeah,
nice glue or a dough or something, right?
right.
And so with those, latest advancements in that technology, we come to the heart of the matter, and that is dust explosions. A lot of people may not be aware of this. I've seen video on flour mills that have exploded and burnt to the ground.
Mhm.
Um, Tell us a little bit about, this in grain bins, flour milling, and so on, and the risk in a bakery.
Yeah, and I'll try to be brief here. And in my 30 years, I've seen a lot of this
I can
awareness get
imagine.
more and more. But ultimately, we're talking about a fine dust in a confined area that's airborne.
Hmm.
So it's not necessarily that, it's just going to blow up if a bag of flour is sitting on the shelf. It's a
Hmm.
deflagration that has to have all the right things in place. And it's not just the whole facility. It could be a regional part of the manufacturing, the mixing and blending area,
Hmm.
or the dosing area where there's airborne dust in a confined space. We really want to be, cautious of static or any kind of ignition source. And so we look at a facility and break it down to where is that potential for the airborne dust in a confined space.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's inside of our vacuum. So we're collecting all this dust and consolidating in our vacuum. So we have to be cautious of what's going on inside of our equipment as well.
So somebody who thinks that they can go down to their local hardware store and buy a central vacuum system and install that into their bakery, they're putting themselves at a significant risk and disadvantage to this type of equipment. Can you give us a little bit more, background in comparing, like, the advancements in your technology and how you manage the static and
Yeah.
how your vacuum systems differ in that sense.
And it's important to understand, depending on what ingredients you're working with, there's a different reaction, a different level of protection that you need. Some
Mhm.
materials are extremely sensitive to static, and some materials aren't. So you have to know the raw ingredients you're dealing with. And when it comes to controls inside of the vacuum, we are talking about sanitation first. So we want to bring in the materials and exhaust only clean air. So there's no cross-contamination in the atmosphere. And we do one step further. Even the discharge air of our equipment isn't going to disrupt your atmosphere and create an airborne problem. Then we look at static. Everything has to be properly grounded and bonded so it can minimize static and take the static away. And that's extremely important throughout the hose, the unit, the filter system, and the electrical components.
Hmm. Hmm.
And we even get down to when you're moving the piece of equipment from point A to point B, you don't want to generate a static charge there either. So it's really, there's a lot that goes into the safeguards of equipment to be used with the combustible dust.
So you just mentioned when you move the equipment, so this doesn't need to be something that is fixed in place with tubes and hoses running all over the plant. You
Right.
can actually move your system in and clean in place.
Yeah, 100%. And we do
That's
think of every facility as regions. You know, there's different regions within the facility, and every facility is different. So you may have an area of your facility that requires this level of protection, and an area over here that requires a different level of protection.
that is cool. That is excellent. I mean, so um this is something that is really interesting to me. And so is there a situation where you might have something that is movable as well as a central vac type system?
Yeah, sure. So when you look at a facility and you look at dust that's being generated as a byproduct, that
Mm-hmm.
might be something that you want to do routine housekeeping on. But then we
Mm-hmm.
always focus in on where did that dust come from in the beginning? If we know we're doing a certain process and the dust is being generated at this source, then we want to put a fixed piece of equipment there that can evacuate the dust at the source so it doesn't become airborne, it doesn't track around and get up overhead. So a lot of
Very
times there's a
interesting.
combination.
Yeah. So almost like, rather than like these little lift the door and sweep it in type things, a more of a hood type system that is I'm trying to think of what the what it's
Like dust
unobtrusive, it's
collection.
just there all
Yeah,
the
we
time,
call
right?
it point of source extraction.
Yeah.
So instead of putting a large ventilation system that's trying to clean a whole room, we get down
Hmm.
right at the source of where that dust is being generated.
Yeah.
And we want to grab it and evacuate it so it can't travel around the facility.
Yeah, so it's if it's like a a a bench type table that where the us bakers we're famous for taking a handful of flour and dusting things, right? So that we get a
Sure.
nice quick and even distribution of flour, but of course that disperses a lot of flour into the air and
Right.
in areas where we don't necessarily want it to be. And so with a hood system like that, it's going to take that dust away. Now,
Yeah.
is there that makes me thinking, I'm putting my frugal cap on now.
Sure.
So there with some of these, is there a way if it's specific to say like that bench scenario that I made an example of where you could recover some of that dust for so that it as an ingredient that doesn't get wasted, or is there even any sense of doing that? I mean, how much are we really going to lose if we are collecting this dust?
So if you want to recover and reuse, there's certain things inside of our system we have to put in place that keeps everything sanitary, the hose and the collection bin.
Hmm.
So normally in your situation at the bench, it wouldn't be reused.
Hmm.
However, let's say I'm baking something and I'm using cornmeal on the tray. Well, that
Hmm.
cornmeal can be recovered and reused potentially because it
Because
came
it's a
out
larger
of the
granule.
process as a virgin material and we picked it up immediately and
Hmm.
reintroduced it. So sometimes yes and sometimes no.
Uh-huh. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
And in the collection bin, if it's primarily food ingredient dust, that's something that can always be collect feed value
Yeah,
anyway, so it's not an
100%.
entire loss,
Yeah.
right?
And the one of the most like common applications would be your mixing and blending. That's when
Mhm.
you're taking bags and mixing and you're taking ingredients and you're putting it into a vessel and a dust cloud wants to be created.
Oh, yes.
A vacuum is very good source to collect that dust at the source.
Yeah.
Where your hood you're talking about over your table is a dust collector, high CFM,
Mhm.
lot of air. So you can do it
Mhm.
with a smaller piece of equipment when you're mixing and blending.
Mhm. Very good, very good. So we've been talking mostly about dust collection and managing combustibles and so on a line and things like that. How about maintaining a clean oven? What can
Yeah.
you offer up there for us in that same
So,
vein?
so that's the raw ingredients and the proofing. And now we get to the baking and the post-production. And maintaining that equipment is so important because it's equipment you can't visibly see. On
Hmm.
the mixing side, I can see the dust. It's being traced all over. In the oven, I can't see what's going on in there. So having a routine PM maintenance of the equipment that's going to have the potential for crumbs. This dust may not be combustible, but it could pose a fire risk. So a routine PM maintenance for the post process is crucial for cross-contamination and also potential fire risks.
Excellent. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that we should address that we haven't covered that you'd like to touch upon? I mean, I'm sure with your 30 years, there's a lot you could be sharing. We could be here a few hours.
We could be. When it comes to industrial vacuums, it's important for people just to understand every application is a little different. And you want to look at what is the task at hand? How much material? What is the material? And think of it as each region of your process. And if you
Mhm.
do that, you can start breaking it down with solution based that really fits the bill. And you're not overbuying for areas you don't need to, and you're getting the proper level of protection for the areas you have to have.
Yeah. As I so often like to tell bakers is that work with your suppliers and vendors, and they are the experts. And you know, companies like Goodway are not going to oversell you. They're going to sell you what you need, right?
Yeah,
And in the end, it's going to save you a lot of money, and it's going to save you heartache and stress.
correct.
And we all want to be just on the beach thinking about the next pina colada, not worrying about if I need a better dust collection system,
Right.
right? I mean, and so that you can take the worry out of that for us. And
And
this is
working with any professional is important because when it comes to combustible dust, there's OSHA and NFPA guidelines that
Mhm.
dictate what's going on, and there's some new ones coming. And you have to make sure that the safeguards you put in place are making you safe, but also hitting the regulations as well.
Absolutely. And it happens so fast. People don't realize how quickly this comes about, because we create these clouds of dust, and it doesn't necessarily need to be flour. It can be other things that nicely disperse in the air, and they have a combustibility. That's why we have all these safety data sheets that come in with our ingredients, that we want to make sure we
Yeah.
understand the risks that are associated with it. And it'll explain on there whether or not it is combustible, and you'll see, and when you get an SDS for wheat flour, that it'll tell you that it is combustible at a certain dispersion and temperature, right?
Mhm.
When I mentioned earlier about I've seen videos of flour mills that were burnt to the ground, and that all came from a tiny little spark on a roll stand, not a big fire or something. It
Right.
was that spark, and then it created the explosion. And what an explosion really is, it's a rapid burning fire, right? That expands out quickly, and then all it needs is more combustible material, and it goes up in flames.
Yeah. It disrupts the area and then creates a secondary and a tertiary area
Yeah,
deflagration. And
yeah.
and you couldn't be more right. In cases you've seen in the past, it could be a heated bearing. It could be
Mhm.
something outside of an actual spark that created the initial that
Yep.
disrupted the
It just
area.
has to be hot enough. Yep.
That's why
Mhm.
housekeeping is so important because that
Yep.
secondary and tertiary disruption is what's taking buildings down and hurting people. And that's
Yep.
why housekeeping is so important.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This has been wonderful, Eric. This has been really informative and interesting. Really appreciate you spending your time with us today.
Yeah.
Um, and the Friday Eve piece of wisdom for us all, and just been definitely Goodway is an amazing example of leadership in our industry, in the baking industry, as well as many other food industries,
Yeah.
especially that Goodway in breweries, right? How can
Yeah,
I
right.
gig, right?
Yeah. There's so many different industries out there, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's my German background comes out in me.
Well, Mark, I appreciate you spending the time on this Thursday and
Yeah.
everything that you guys do for awareness in the industry, because together, as we do more awareness, it's just going to make us stronger to understand what solutions are out there.
Thank you for that. I really
Yeah.
appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah. Yeah. And with that has been our Thought Leadership Thursday for you today. Our guest has been Eric Potorsky from Goodway Technologies. Don't forget to subscribe, ring that bell. My name is Mark Florka. I'm the Baked in Science podcast host, and have a very happy Thursday, everybody.